Torah study, we have two other blessings today as well. One is that this is Rosh Chodesh Iyar, so we'll share a little blessing for that. And it's also today, already in Israel, but here for us, Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day for Israel. So as we are going to engage in the study of Torah, Baruch Atah Adonai melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Praise you, Adonai, our God, creator of the universe. You've sanctified us with mitzvot, and you've instructed us to engage with words of Torah. As I mentioned, this is Rosh Chodesh Iyar. It's actually a 2-day Rosh Chodesh. So yesterday was also Rosh Chodesh, but it was the 30th day of Nisan. This is the actual first day of the month of Iyar. And so we, as we're in the midst of counting anyway, the 16th day of Omer this is a time of renewal and a time of thinking towards the spring. And of course, in Iyar, we celebrate the birthday of Israel. So, Hirat Somel Fanach Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu she'chadesh aleinu et hachodesh hazeh chodesh Iyar l'tova v'livracha v'titein lanu chayim arukim, chayim shel shalom, chayim shel parnasa, chayim shetehei vanu ahavat Torah v'yirat shamayim, chayim sheyemal'u mish'alot lebeinu l'tova. Amen. Our God and God of our ancestors, may the new month of Iyar bring us goodness and blessing. May we have long life, peace, and prosperity, a life exalted by the love of Torah and the reverence for the divine, a life in which the longings of our hearts are fulfilled for good. So today we celebrate the new month of Iyar. Maybe a good month for you and all. In Israel, I think they have a perfect way of celebrating their Memorial Day and Independence Day. You know, our Memorial Day is at the end of May, and it in some of the eastern cities, they have marvelous parades and gatherings with clergy and communal leaders, veterans, of course, and their families at the town square, where there would be a real proper Memorial Day. That's not the case everywhere in the country. It is the case in Israel, but they have it timed so that Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembrance, their Memorial Day, comes right before their Yom HaAtzmaut, their day of celebrating the independence of the country. Of course, our Independence Day is July 4th, and again, separate. I think we've lost a lot of it, but again, they're a country that's now just about to be 73 years old. And we're going to celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut with a very special program on Thursday, and Yoni Bachman's got some really cool things, and by Susan and I, but it's the confluence of those two events. One is Yom HaZikaron, and then Yom HaAtzmaut, back to back, which is so important. So as tonight the sunset falls, that's the official start of Yom HaZikaron, their Memorial Day. And it reminds everyone that independence, that freedom that we enjoy and all too often take for granted, did not come without sacrifice, and the ultimate sacrifice by a lot of men and women who gave their lives to create this country, the United States of America. And of course, in Israel, since it's a small country, just about everybody knows someone else who not only is serving in the army or has served in the army, but almost everyone knows someone who has been wounded in battle, if not killed. And so Memorial Day is a very meaningful, very personal time for Israelis. So there's a little passage in our Mishkan Tefillah, our Reform Movement's prayer book. It says, Yizkor, we remember. Remember our people who could not escape past tyranny and hate. May their memory be more than a distant shadow. For their dreams left unfulfilled and lives taken too soon, we remember. Remember our brothers and sisters whose sacrifice gave birth to the state of Israel. May their courage be our inspiration and our strength. For life cut short and vision unrealized, we remember. Remember the fallen of the Israel Defense Forces, the victims of terror and tragedy. May the darkness of their loss not obscure the light of peace. They were in love with the land and in love with life. For the agony, the tears, the mothers and the fathers, for the children who were and for the children yet to be, we remember. Amen. So I thought those were two pieces that lent weight to what we're going to do today. The Torah portion is actually a double portion. It's Tazria-Metzora, which Arnie has, we've got two doctors here. We've got both Arnie and Mark Sorkin. And although neither of you are dermatologists, you nevertheless, you nevertheless could weigh in. Tazria-Metzora is infamously given the bad rap of being all about leprosy. Well, first things first, it's not about leprosy. Tzara'at, this skin inflammation, was not about a physical disease, but rather it was a contagion that, at least according to both the Torah as well as subsequent commentary, it was a contagion that had its roots in emotional, spiritual sense, and that being that there is, from our ancestors, an understanding from the earliest point of view that there was a mind-body connection. And it took a long time for modern medicine to pick up on that. But the idea that someone could have some psychological, emotional, spiritual imbalance that would cause a manifestation of a physical problem, that was understood in the earliest days of our ancestors, and Tazria-Metzora talks about that. And so what I wanted to do is to look at one of the key passages in this double Torah portion, and to look at how they reacted to what is a frightening phenomenon. That is, when you see someone that has an outbreak and it looks like it's contagious, what does the society do in reaction? And then we can have a little chance to talk about our own reaction, because in the past I've been able to relate this Torah portion to things like, well, how we treat those with AIDS. That was a major conversation that we had back in the 90s and early 2000s, as people really freaked out about those who with AIDS, about isolation and quarantine. Subsequently, we've had a lot of other diseases come and go. Now we're facing a different thing, and that is the reintegration of those who had COVID back into society, the reintegration or not of those who have not had a vaccine, right? And at what point do we make it exclusive that you have to have I'm a card carrying vaccinator, right? So I can show that I have not only my COVID tests, but my measles and influenza and polio and every other kind of vaccine. So I'm going to keep you muted because you keep coming through the other way, though. So as we're about to go into that Torah portion, I wanted to get some of your initial reactions because this is a story that's unfolding in our real time, and you are dealing with it in a very personal way. And we're going to look at some of the ways in which our ancestors had as well. So go ahead and unmute if you'd like to share, Mark Sorkin.
Well, I have to say this is a double parsha for me because I am a dermatologist, and my oldest son's bar mitzvah was this weekend, anniversary was this weekend. So I studied it a lot, and I didn't find any much relationship on a scientific basis to what was really happening, how we know that things happen today. But there was certainly a lot of metaphorical and creative thinking that went into that.
Good. Margie?
I really am struggling with people who won't get vaccinated, and the whole idea of whether you should have proof of it, which should be pretty easy. I mean, we require so many things. Look at the voting laws now, right? You have to have your ID. So I don't know, and I don't like how it makes me feel about them.
Right. Very good. Arnie.
I guess I struggle with something else. Why is there feedback?
The echo?
Yeah, you might have your volume up a little bit too high.
I might. I guess, like I said, no? All right, how's that better? Yeah, I mean, I'm troubled by something else. The argument that it's my right not to get vaccinated. It's my right not to wear a mask. Now, remember, I'm originally from Canada. I've studied United States, everything else. Why don't I have a right then to walk around with a shotgun? Why don't I have a right to walk around? I'm getting at. In other words, this is a threat to society. Yet somehow there we draw a line. But with this one, we do not.
And Arnie, it's the same argument, other things as well, about rights over responsibility. And I think they have to go together because we aren't just individuals.
Are there lawyers in this group that can explain this, why it's not?
Yeah.
But this is a threat to society. I don't get it. Am I allowed to walk around the neighborhood with open flame? I'm a fire breather. I'm walking around throwing flames over. Right. Somewhere in there, you're a risk to society.
So
no. So why does it happen with this?
Right. And so I think that's very much a part of the discussion that's unfolding. And we're seeing it we first saw it just a few years ago really come to fore, and that is in the public school system, where schools wrestled with the admission of students who were not vaccinated. Mm-hmm. And we had anti-vaxxing parents who were against getting their kids with, again, the measles and the whooping cough and the smallpox and the polio and all these other things. And they, the school systems haven't really told and yet we might very well get to that stage where a person, in order to be admitted to a public gathering, whether it's a ball game or a movie theater or a school or a synagogue, a church, would have to show be on record to have been vaccinated. That's a step the society is right now wrestling with. And it is an echo of that same kind of concern that our ancestors did, and all ancient people did. When someone had some kind of contagion, some kind of disease, something that was communicable, that they knew was going to affect, Arnie, you're 100% correct, everyone that they came in contact with. Janet, please.
Well, do you think that part of it is our white privilege? Just take, for instance, when we would choose to travel to Ethiopia, or we'd have to get all sorts of shots, and nobody complained. People of means did that. People of, poor people didn't do that, whatever. But we didn't complain because we were going to go see people that we thought were lesser than us. Now we're saying that all of us are equal, and all of us need to have this vaccine, and all of us should be able to show it. And it seems like we're more hesitant to do it. I don't know.
I don't know that it was about the lesser, because my brother, when he went to the Peace Corps, my old roommate, when he went to the Peace Corps, they gave them those shots, but they even said, no matter what the shots, you're going to come back with the tsetse fly is going to bite you, and you're going to come back with the rest of your life carrying some of the diseases. But these vaccinations will make it lesser. So I don't think it was a sociological or anthropological thing between this society and that society. It was, you're going to go into an area where there are certain bugs and viruses that are going to infect your body and is going to impact you the rest of your life.
So why are the same people having the problem with? I agree. I mean, I don't understand the hesitancy to get the vaccine. When the polio vaccine came out, they just went to the schools and gave it to all the kids. They didn't ask you. They didn't ask the parents. You didn't have to sign a permission form. They just came and they did it.
I know, but look, I want to get to Mark and Alan, but Janet, you have to look at some of the history with that. They had a lot of celebrities would go on to the the news, and did interviews, and they did, in the Life magazines, this celebrity and that celebrity saying, I got my polio shot. So there is a psychological leap that had to happen before everyone was willing to do it. It's not like everyone said, oh, we're going to do it, because there is a natural suspicion among certain peoples, and certainly within a certain category of Americans, but I think in just about every community, a certain suspicion about what the government's trying to pull over on you. And within the communities of color, they look at the actions of the government, experimenting with them in some horrific incidents in the past, saying, hey, we were told to trust the government, and they put things in us that turned out to be very, very dangerous. So now you're telling us to trust the government again? Yeah. Alan, and then Mark. Alan Markman.
Thank you. I mentioned this once before, but we're in the age group. We know what 1984 means. And the government is taking control. And where do you stop? For example, I'm in King Soopers, and there's an announcement to put your mask on. How many times we're going to be told, put your mask on? Everybody's doing it automatically. And in addition, I heard that a chip has been developed which can immediately tell the readers if you're going to get the virus, COVID. And that chip, of course, will be inserted in the body somewhere. And the technology is unbelievable what's going to happen. Yeah. But then, that chip, they could tell, they could show where we're going, what we're doing, and all of that. We're in a difficult situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, Dr. Sorkin.
Well, I don't know why people are afraid of this, but it isn't just in general being suspicious, but there are certain things that happen in the government that make people suspicious about it, and you can't blame them for But also, when these things were developing, this was all new technology with the Sabin vaccine and the Salk vaccine, and nobody knew what the side effects were going to be. What I don't understand is what happened. Why isn't there, or maybe there is, a free speech thing that lets you take one vaccine over another? Are the people just afraid of all the vaccines, or do they just want to wait and see how this first one's going to do? I mean, when I was in medical school, was the hog flu. That was a pretty serious complication. And today we get complications from the regular viruses that we get, including the paralytic diseases. So you go in for a shot to travel, and you come back paralyzed. And I see why people are afraid of that. But why isn't it required that people have the shot in order to pursue leisure activities or things like that?
Right. Or public activities. I think that's the question you're asking is the question that the society in general is asking. In Israel right now, there are these cards, and that card will give you entrance into the various events. Right now, they just released in Israel for those who wish to travel to Israel. You have to have your vaccination, but to the point as to which vaccination, they said it has to be either Pfizer or Moderna. That the Johnson & Johnson, which I don't know what happened to their vaccine, it turns out to be somewhat of a disaster that they're dealing with right now. And the AstraZeneca, the one that came from England, has its own issues with blood clots and other things. Now, Fauci said famously that when asked about which brand he would take, he said whichever one was nearest. I don't think that's the case now. I think it's clear that people would prefer to have one of these two leading cases, vaccinations, that's not, and neither of which are having the same kind of problems. Although it may unfold that as there are these variants of the virus, that they'll continue to have to grow and update their vaccinations. So we're right in the middle of this discussion, which is why this Torah portion, that's what I want to get to next, which is why this Torah portion I think is so powerful. Under normal circumstances, we read through it, your eyes sort of glaze over and you're going, oi, with the skin, is it puffy? Is it swollen? Is it red? Is there white? Is there a hair and what it looks like? Is it spreading? Is it shrinking? And who's going to look at it? And it's not the kind of thing that the bar mitzvah boys and girls go, ooh, can I eat that portion? Instead, their parents go, Rabbi, what did you do? And I said, what can I? It's the calendar. What can I do? Hi, Michael. Good to see you. So we have another medical professional. So let's look at this week's Torah portion. Again, it's a double portion, Tazria-Metzora. And we're only going to look at the 13 verses, the beginning of chapter 13, and walk through it. Because again, I was struck by how what they proposed and what they had expressed gives us food for thought as we are in the middle of our own pandemic. So, Alan Markman, I've just employed the Markman Rule of expanding the view here. Could you like to share with us?
Okay, I will. Adonai spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when a person has on the skin of his body a swelling, a rash, or a discoloration, and it develops into a scaly affection on the skin of his body, it shall be reported to Aaron the priest or to one of his sons, the priests.
Okay. Now the key here again, that it doesn't mention leprosy, although it's in some of the commentaries they do, but that was just an old translation. This more modern translation avoids that. It's simply on his skin, there's a sa'ate or a sapachet, there's a swelling, there's a rash, an outbreak of some sort. Now, the commentators will look at those three words, sa'ate, sapachet, and a bacheret, to say those are probably different manifestations or different degrees of the affection. So Rashi picks up on that. And Alan, go ahead and share what he had to say.
He says, these are the names of the leprous plagues. What is that, Sa'at?
Sa'ate or Safachat or Baheret.
Okay, those are the names of the leprous plagues. A rising scab, etc., and they are the one wider than the other.
Right. So the discoloration, some are very white and some are less. And that just shows the different variants of this affection that they're talking about. And then, well, how many brought to Aaron and his sons?
He shall be brought to Aaron. It's an enactment of Scripture that the uncleanliness and purification of leprous plagues are pronounced only by the mouth of a priest.
Right. Again, these translations of Rashi and some of the older commentaries say make it a leprous plague, even though it was pretty well known, even a long time ago, that it was not leprosy per se. It was a skin affection, and it wasn't necessarily a medical condition, but more a psychosomatic or even spiritual, emotional issue. Ibn Ezra plays into that as well. Who would like to read what Ibn Ezra has to share?
Can I make one comment about
yes, sir.
One we just read?
Yes.
So that puts the priests in the position of an expert witness on leprous things. Is that really an intent?
No, that's a very good point, because that's one of the pieces that Ibn Ezra and or Chaim will get into, that they are not necessarily the experts. Let me give you the example of this. You have to have a credible spokesperson. Who in the United States has become the credible spokesperson when it comes to the COVID-19 contagion? Fauci, right? Now, has he devoted his whole life to dealing with specifically that kind of COVID virus? Is he the world's expert on it? No, but he's become the spokesperson from it, right? For it. I'm just about to give a terrible example. During the height of the pandemic, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, 10 months ago, the great spokesperson who was the calming voice in New York was Governor Cuomo. Governor Cuomo would come on, if not daily, then frequently, and people said, "Oh, isn't that nice? He's speaking so calmly." Well, in part is because his counterpart at 1600 Pennsylvania would also have daily conferences, and those weren't such calm expressions that he had. But Cuomo was the spokesperson. And that was nice. People wanted to hear from him. Was he a doctor? He wasn't a doctor. He didn't even play a doctor on television. But he was the spokesperson that people thought, oh, he's the leader. He knows everything that's going on, and he's going to give us the straight dope. Turned out that he was the dope. I mean, it didn't turn out to be that he was such a credible witness after all, but we didn't know that at the time. Nevertheless, to have a spokesperson who's not necessarily the greatest of experts, that's not uncommon. It wasn't uncommon in the old days, and it's certainly not uncommon now, because we just had a couple of examples. The high priest had the street cred, had the credibility. He's not going to lie to you. He's not a doctor. He's not a medical expert, but we trust what he says is going to be true. How's that? Go ahead, Margie.
Well, isn't it also that they would be in the position of power and influence over whether, this was spreading? And instead of rumor to rumor, you have someone you really trust and whose whole raison d'etre is the community, and they would make the good decision. That was, I think, the disappointment with Cuomo. It sounded like he was doing that, but he missed a few.
Yes, he did. In fact, the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
But I think you're 100% correct, because the whole society was oriented around this, the Kohanim. And so what he had to share would either be excluding certain people or including certain people. When can they come back? Dr. Luderman.
Yeah, I mean, again, you're getting into the issue of credibility in the United States. Basically, the Trump era blew the CDC out of the water. That used to be the gold standard. Okay, so that's gone. Then you suddenly have, even Fauci was under attack. Why? Because someone higher than him blew him out of the water. That was Trump. So, we're in a mess at the moment, because how do you reestablish the credibility? It sounds back in Israel Israelites at that time, it was simple, unless Moses suddenly got up and said, "Don't believe him."
Right.
You know what I mean? So I kind of, it's a shame. We really are in a mess here because the hierarchy of credibility has been shattered.
Right. There has to be someone who's going to get up there without an agenda. It's not, I'm not going to be reelected, whatever. The high priest was not being reelected. Someone without an agenda who's just going to say, here's what we got from the experts, right? And when that's violated, and I think, to be fair, Fauci has done a remarkably fabulous job. I think almost everybody, I think years from now, people look back and say, the guy was awesome. He was wonderful. Unfortunately, the politicians got in and they wanted to manipulate this for their own well-being. And I hope history judges them accordingly. Mark Sorkin.
There's a funny anecdote. After 9/11, everybody said that there was going to be anthrax in the mail, and nobody knew what anthrax looked like. So I found a great photograph of it and put it on the wall where patients checked out of my office. And I said, "This is what anthrax looks like." The first 5 patients got to their parking lot, came back and said they think they have anthrax. I took a picture. So I had to take the picture down because they were scaring everybody.
Yeah.
You see, you're doing a public service. You just cause people to get freaked out. Laura, did you tell him to take it down?
Oh, no, I don't tell him anything to do anything.
But I listened to her.
You should. Alan Wentz, please.
Yeah. With all due respect, Fauci had to take him with a cup of tea. I equate Fauci to a weatherman that predicts a blizzard, and the next day there's nothing, and nothing happens. Fauci, over the last 13 months, he reversed himself so many times. I don't know who, I can't believe him.
Yeah, well, and that is a problem. I mean, obviously, when we had that with the CDC, I mean, as well, the newness of this virus has caused us to really pause and to realize that no matter how far our medical establishment has gone, there's still things that we are discovering. But we're learning from that, because no doubt there's going to be future pandemics down the road, and hopefully we'll be better prepared. But let's look at one of our ancestors. I'm going to look specifically at Ibn Ezra's comment. Ibn Ezra is just one generation after Rashi. Also Spain's 1089 to 1164. And this is what he had to say. Who would like to share Ibn Ezra's message? Commentary.
I'll read it.
Okay.
I'm not I don't speak as well as Alan Sr., but I'll try. Scriptures does not read, whosoever of the house of Israel, because it wants to include strangers.
Now it's making the comment, hold on, Alan.
Okay.
It's making the comment on why did it say Adam and not in Ish or Yisrael or the Bnei Yisrael. It says any person. So Adam is not just a man, any person, male, female, an adult or a child, Israelite or a stranger. Okay, similarly, please. Alan, you don't continue. All right. Alan, weren't you hip to unmute there? All right, I'm going to go ahead. So similarly, when any man of you, there is, Alan, you on now? Go ahead and speak now.
Yes. When any man of you, for there is one law to the native born and to the stranger regarding offerings. The Torah includes the stranger in the laws relating to maladies, so that the stranger does not defile another person. For leprosy is a disease that is passed on from the sick to the healthy. Then he shall be brought by this consent or against his will. For one who sees these signs will force the inflicted. Go to the Kohen.
Good, great, thank you, Alan. So what we have here then is a one of the formulas that we were talking earlier. What if someone didn't want to have the inspection from the Kohen? So what the commentator Ibn Ezra teach? What was the halakha on it? He was forced, right? This was not a volitional kind of thing. If we think that the society is in danger because you are potentially carrying a contagion, we're not going to ask your permission. Because society has a stake in making sure that this is under control. I don't know if get another reader, Wendy or Janet or Margie, if you'll share this other piece from Ibn Ezra on this next page.
Okay, I can do it. Onto Aaron the priest. The meaning of Aaron the priest is the Cohen who is anointed in his place.
Not just to Aaron, but whoever is the Kohen or the Kohen Agadol. And then?
Or unto one of his sons, the priests. This means one of the common priests outside of the temple, such as the Kohanim of Anatot. The meaning of the priest is that they should not be from among those who are disqualified to serve as priests.
I.e., if for whatever reason they've got a mum, this is an important thing I'm going to get to later on. They have a wound, if they have a defect, and they may be of the priestly family, but in order to be a priest who carries out certain duties, they have to have, again, mind-body balance. They have to be healthy. And then finally, sapachat.
A scab. The word sapachat, scab, is related to sephakani, put me, I pray thee, and vinispeku, and they shall cleave in, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. It refers to a disease which attaches itself to one place.
Okay, well, I could have eliminated that one. That wasn't but they're wrestling with trying to see, well, what are the different forms that we're looking at here? So Margie, I'll give you a nice one after this one. This is important because this gets us to that question we had. Is he a spokesperson, or is the Kohen, the high priest, is he supposed to be some kind of expert? And Chizkuni, 13th century France, says, no, he's not the expert. He's the spokesperson. He's the trusted person. Margie, go ahead.
The priests, excluding priests who have defiled themselves by committing certain sins deliberately, so that they have lost their status permanently. How do we know that all the Israelites are included? Answer from the words, or one of, which includes anyone who is a member of the Jewish people. If so, what is the point of the Torah having written from among his sons, the priests? It is to teach you that only the priest can give a ruling concerning ritual purity and ritual impurity. Not even the Supreme Court can do so. Are then all priests experts by birth? The system works as follows. When the problem of Zorat arises, someone who has studied the subject is consulted. The priest accepts the superior knowledge of the expert and makes his ruling based on what he has been told by the expert who has examined the afflicted person. It is irrelevant whether the priest is truly familiar or not with the symptoms that the Torah has taught us.
Yeah, so I thought that's perfect. I mean, we're talking about almost 800 years ago. Chizkuni is saying, look, what we have here is this trusted spokesperson. He's the Kohen Agadol, but he's no expert, right? He has to consult the scientific and the medical experts. But since he's the trusted person, the message has to come through him. And I think that's where we are right now.
He becomes the spokesperson for the expert.
Right. But his obligation then is to consult with the expert. He just can't get out there and start, well, I heard and someone told me. No, he's got to do some real thought about it, so that he becomes the anti gossiper, not the person who's going to be purveying in rumor, but rather in facts, at least to the very best that he can ascertain them. Arnie.
But our system here is broken down. We have exactly that system. In terms of the experts, they were, in fact, the panels that the CDC worked with. That's where the information came out. Then I don't care who was the spokesman. You assume that until Trump basically captured the CDC, and suddenly your panel of experts is missing, and then it's a free for all. You can have this guy Walters, whatever his name is, a pediatric radiologist, step up, and you got the president listening to him. So the whole thing now, I don't know how you rebuild all this. Yeah. It's going to be a hell of a task.
Well, that's, I think that's what we're talking right now. We all get a vote into this. And part of the expression that we need to convey is that we have lost that trustworthiness of it used to be the old, medical examiner, or who was the, on the cabinet who dealt with medical issues.
Health and Human Services.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, some person who says, you know what, I may not be the expert, I've got teams of experts, and here's the latest. And so when you turn to this person, it didn't matter if they were this political party or that political party. You knew you were going to get straight dope, and we're not getting that right now. We're getting a lot of rumor. Go ahead.
But, you know, I think we've also given some of our healthcare system and healthcare responsibility to the Supreme Court, which it specifically said not to do. And I take that as women's health has been turned over to the Supreme Court. And even the whole health plan that they put into place at the suggestion of experts and whatever to make sure that Americans get health insurance, the Supreme Court has been able to dismantle it to some degree. And so we're just not following any of this stuff right.
Good point, Janet. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're all paying the consequence from it. We're all paying the penalty from this. People with an agenda. Go ahead, Alan Markman.
Yeah, when I think that these rumors or things that we're hearing, that we have to consider the source. In today's society, or that was run by Trump, was that a reliable source? And I think that becomes part of it.
Yeah. Arnie.
Rabbi, do we have anybody? We don't have a lawyer in place. What I'm curious about is when is something deemed a danger to society, and therefore the law says you can't do it before it causes a problem? Otherwise, I'm building myself a nuclear reactor. I've always wanted to do it.
Well, but you
I've always assumed that you weren't allowed to do that.
No, but this starts to rub up against all kinds of personal freedoms. I'll give you one that we'll all get to at some point, and that is the personal freedom to get behind an automobile and drive, right? So right now, the responsibility are those of us with parents who are starting to utilize the touch and go system of driving. They have little dents all over their car because when they touch something, they go, "Ooh, I went too far." And it's at what point do you say no? You can't drive. Now we say you can drive once you're 16, but is that a little bit too young? And at what point do we say you're too old to drive? Now we get into personal freedoms, and same thing with people with their guns, and now same thing with the vaccinations. At what point does the government have the power to intercede into our personal lives? And at some point we have a social stake in it. I don't want to be on this highway. Yesterday I'm on my way to the cemetery for a funeral. We're on 225 trying to go up to Mount Nebo. And there's some person who was, I don't want to say that they were, what age they were, but it was, they were up there, going 45. Well, what happens when someone in the middle lane is going 45 on 225, right? And the person was like, they're holding on with for dear life. Is that an endangerment to the society? Yes. Is it also an endangerment for the 18-year-old who's all hyped up and is drag racing down Broadway and killed someone yesterday? Yeah. So what point does society have to say, well, you're too young or you're too old? And you have to do this or you have to do that. And those are the debates that we're having in our society. I want to get back to the credibility of the spokesperson and who has a stake in the society's welfare and for the welfare of the individual. So check this out. I want to get to this piece real quick. I don't know, Margie, if you want to continue reading, this is the English here.
The priest shall examine the affection on the skin of his body. If hair in the affected patch has turned white and the affection appears to be deeper than the skin of his body, it is a leprous affection. When the priest sees it, he shall pronounce him unclean. But if it's a white discoloration on the skin of his body, which does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and the hair in it has not turned white, the priest shall isolate the affected person for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest shall examine him, and in the affection, has remained unchanged in color, and the disease has not spread on the skin, the priest shall isolate him for another 7 days.
So there is a quarantine, and that's Chizkun is going to get into that as well. Then on that 7th day, the priest shall examine him again. If the affection has faded and has not spread on the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. Vitaharo, it is a rash, and he shall wash his clothes, and he shall be clean. But look who is doing the examination. The examination is done by
The priest.
the priest, exactly, HaKohen. And that's so important for us to consider for a second here. And I don't want to get all to the technical part of it. Rashi does mention that after the quarantine, clothes should be washed, but he should be declared as clean. And just this last little section I wanted to get to right here. Anyone else? Either Margie, you're doing great. You want to read this last little piece?
Sure, but if the rash should spread on the skin after he has presented himself to the priest and been pronounced clean, he shall present himself again to the priest. And if the priest sees that the rash has spread on the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is leprosy.
Pause for a second.
Mm-hmm.
If he will present himself to the priest,
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean? He trusts the priest. He trusts the priest, that the priest is not against him. The priest has, the Kohen has an authenticity that he will look after my best interest as well as everyone else's best interest. He's the one who's going to declare me clean, but he will have his authority undercut. He will have his authenticity undercut if he declares me clean and it turns out that I'm not. And also it'll be a danger to me. I don't want to be a danger to me or to my loved ones. So there's a trust there that even though I might be put back into quarantine, this person I can turn to. Go ahead, verse 9.
When a person has scaly affection, it shall be reported to the priest. If the priest finds on the skin a white swelling, which has turned some hair white, with a patch of undiscolored flesh in the swelling, it is chronic leprosy on the skin of his body, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean. He need not isolate him, for he is unclean. If the eruption spreads out over the skin so that it covers all of the skin of the affected person from head to foot, wherever the priest can see, if the priest sees that the eruption has covered the whole body, he shall pronounce the affected person clean. He is clean, for he has turned all white. I.e. that from his judgment then, this contagion, this affection has reached its course. And now that it's turned white, that white skin is no longer sapachet, is no longer scabby. It's no longer kecha. It's no longer red and oozing, which is that it's still growing, but rather it's white. That's already scar tissue. So he's going to be the one who looks at this. I want to get, as we conclude, this is a passage that we're going to have in a couple of weeks, chapter 21, about the disqualification of the priests. None shall defile himself for any dead person. So, a Kohen has to be emotionally and spiritually in balance, so it won't go to the cemetery, with the exception of his mother, his father, his son, his daughter, brother, sister, etc. Those are the krovim. So that's why Kohanim do not go to the cemetery. That's except for their nearest of relatives. The Kohen Hagadol doesn't even go to the cemetery for his own parents. So he doesn't go to the cemetery or come into contact with the dead under any circumstances, but that's only one. There's only one Kohen Hagadol. So I want to get to this passage right here, though, where it says, no man among the offspring of Aaron the priest, so all the Kohanim are descendants of Aaron, who has a defect shall be qualified to offer Adonai's offering by fire,
having a defect, he shall not be qualified to offer the food of his God. He may eat of the food, but he shall not enter behind the curtain or come near the altar. He has a defect. And what are those defects? Well, look up here from verse 18 on. No one at all who has a defect shall be qualified. No man who is blind or lame or has a limb too short or too long. No man who has a broken leg or a broken arm or a hunchback or a dwarf, or who has a growth in his eye or has a boil scar or scurvy or crushed testes, i.e. if this person has a wound, an injury to his body, and he's a Kohen, he no longer qualifies to be able to serve the people because he is physically struggling, right? Who's the person who is inspecting that person who is tzorad, who has this outbreak, that people are afraid is a contagion, that person who has this this virus or this bacteria or whatever is scaring people? Who's the person who's going to be inspecting?
The Kohen.
The Kohen. Who has the most to lose by getting so close to that person who is affected?
That Kohen inspector.
Exactly. So here we have someone who, he's not the expert, although he can report to the experts what he saw. But this person is on the front lines. He's the Kohen, but he's not in the back just reporting. He's the one who looks. And so when he looks and sees that this person has the affected disease, then he can put him in quarantine. At the same time, what was the last thing he did? He inspected this person, the quarantine was over, and he brought the people who had this disease back into society, and he declared before them, tahor. Tahor.
Unclean.
Tahor is he is clean.
Clean, yeah.
He's okay. He's all right. Look who's leading him back. Don't be afraid. This person's no longer dangerous. He would, if he was dangerous, he would be affecting me. I'm right here with him. I'm the one declaring him that he's clean. We don't have anything in our society that after a person has been struggling with an illness, emotional, psychological, or physical, we have no way of bringing those people who had been isolated, who had been in the hospital, who had been in rehab. We have no way in which there's an official person who can bring that person back and say, tahor. He's okay, she's okay. And we're missing that because instead people say, this person had a breakdown. They used to say breakdown. What do they say now? You know, that, right? And we ostracize them because of an illness. Margie.
Well, Princess Diana did that for AIDS patients, and then other celebrities took over, and that's really, I think, helped reduce the fear. But you're talking more on a personal level of someone coming back to a community.
Yeah.
Which I think would be great to develop some sort of ritual.
Right. And we have it in this week's Torah portion. So that's what I'm saying. On first glance, you look at it and you go, oy, it's about leprosy or some kind of skin disease. And what is this? What's the relevance? Okay. For God's sakes, as we've had for our conversation, it is the most relevant. Because instead people have rumor, they have fear, they have misinformation, they have people who are manipulating information for their own personal agenda. But to have a credible spokesperson who does have some risk to say, I can personally say this person is okay. Well, let's welcome them back. And there was, I think that's a role model for us to say, we have to, yes, be very careful about identifying those who have a disease or have an issue, give them the help, keep them in a situation where they're not going to be adversely affecting other people. But just as certainly as there might be some quarantine or some medical attention, we have to make just as much effort to help reintegrate them into society. And we've missed out on so many of those steps, and we're paying the price.
And Rabbi, I think that's interesting on mental health issues in particular.
You bet.
Because a lot of these people who have done gun shooting, have gone and shot up places, have seeked mental health and have been treated, whatever, the crisis averted. And yet they still go and get a gun. So I'm not sure that we can give our blessing to people that easily. On the other hand, people who've had COVID, they test negative for COVID and then they're given the okay by their doctor and by whomever, and they go back into society, and it's just like they're normal. So I don't know that I follow your discussion totally, accept your discussion.
Yeah. Right. Well, in what way would you integrate someone who had some mental health issues? Someone has a breakdown. Someone was in rehab, and all we know is that then there's the whispers and the rumors. And by the way, what the heck is the mental health facility? Someone has an issue, has a breakdown. You know where they give them, if they can find a bed, they give them a bed for a couple of nights. And once they determine, the hospital, that they're not going to, that they're no longer in harm's way, then they release them after a night or two.
So I don't know how they get defined as being cured, or how you would give a blessing to somebody. And, that's one of the things about purchasing guns. If you have a mental health issue history, you're not supposed to be able to buy guns in some states.
Yeah.
I had some other hands. Go ahead, Margie, and others who wanted to share.
Well, no, just Janet, that's true in Colorado, but it's still not fail-safe. And because of the 72-hour hold is really to create an area where there's a time to de-escalate. It's not real treatment. So I think that the profession itself, the psychiatry, would have to come up with some way for us to feel confident that somebody was always going to take their meds and be okay. I mean, that's pretty hard.
Yeah, it is hard because they start to self-medicate. They take their meds and they feel a little bit sluggish, and they go, oh, you know what? I feel I skipped taking my meds for a couple of days and I feel great. I got my energy back, and then it happens again.
Right.
It's a real thing for us.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have neglected the mental health, but we've also neglected the ongoing physical health of those of people. Unfortunately, especially those who are challenged without, who have limited funds and means, and that has also been a plague on our society. But I think personally we can play a role when someone is better to make sure that they are reintegrated into society. I don't know of too many other places out there in the world that are more effective than that, than a synagogue or in a religious institution, where we know, I go to the hospitals, I'm in the homes a lot with people. And what's the first thing we do? We bring a person back and we have the Birkat HaGomel, the prayer that says, thank God she had been in a terrible state, and now we welcome them back, and we welcome them back with blessings, and we welcome them up on the bima to recite blessings over a Torah. So those are the roles that we can play in the synagogue, and I'm glad each of us can participate in that as well. I wanted to see if anyone else had any closing comments, but as we are at the 1 o'clock hour, and I just hope that you have at least, when someone starts talking smack about Tazria-Metzora, about those Torah portions, and they say, boy, what you say, you know what, there's some really interesting stuff in there. And I think there is, and I hope you'll agree. All right, guys, hey, please tune in on Thursday. We have a very, very special program for Yom Ha'atzmaut. Yoni Bachman is going to be sharing with us some very cool musical, social pieces. Susan and I will be a part of this. Yoni, any words that you can give to pump the prime, to hype this up?
Yeah, I guess we're gonna do some cool stuff. No, we're gonna look at some good music and learn through that. will be a multimedia presentation.
It's a fabulous program, and Yoni is the best person to help lead it. So thank you very much, buddy. Jerry, keep going, getting stronger and stronger. Thursday, you may be home. Otherwise, we'll get to see you whenever we can. And my blessings to all of you. And I'll see you soon. Be safe, be good, keep warm.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
Rabbi.